Group's videos. Oh, okay. Hello, and welcome to Verdis Group's video series, where we meet to discuss the many nuances of climate action and sustainability planning. I'm Daniel Lawse, Principal and Chief Century Thinker at Verdis Group, and today I'm excited to speak to my brilliant colleague, Kim Morrow. Kim is a national thought leader on our team, and officially her title is the Director of Climate Planning and Resilience at Verdis Group. She works extensively with climate action and resilience for cities and organizations across the country, including leading the City of Salem, Oregon Climate Action Plan and wrapping up Lincoln, Nebraska's Climate Action Plan earlier this year. She and I have both been following the activity of COP26 in Glasgow over the last 2 weeks, and today we want to share a few of our takeaways from our perspective. Let's dive in. So, Kim, I always love asking kind of a kickoff question. And today I want to ask you that imagine if you were at COP26, there are lots of different places you could be. Which room would you have been in? Outside protesting in the street, hanging out with the youth movement, or maybe in the room with a bunch of old white men making decisions for the rest of our world and the future of our common home? Or somewhere else?
That's a great question, Daniel. In the last few years, I've been salivating, wishing I could be at one of these COP meetings. It seems so interesting to be there. And yet I think about the amount of fossil fuel I'd have to burn to get there. So it doesn't seem like it's really a good idea. I think it would be fascinating to be in the room with the decision makers, but the tedium of what I understand, how it's really like, people just making micro decisions over wording and commas and everything. It sounds really tiring. So I think it'd be a lot more fun to be out protesting on the street.
Nice. Do we happen to know if COP26 uses the Oxford comma? That's an ongoing debate in our team.
I don't know. Good question.
Well, so let's talk about what happened. I mean, there was a lot that happened over those 2 weeks. There was some good news and some bad news. And I thought maybe we could start with some of the bad news first so we can end on a positive note, because there's plenty of good stuff that happened too. So What was something that you were kind of like, oh, this is disappointing?
Yeah, I think it was really a mixed bag on the whole. There were some good things that happened, but there were some disappointing things that happened. One of the bigger things that people may have heard about is there was a last minute change to one of the resolutions that was introduced by India and China, apparently. And the resolution was set to say something about countries agreeing to phase out coal. And at the last minute, they changed that wording. So it said phase down instead of phase out. So that was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, and that was pressure from India. And I think China and even the US were supportive of that shift.
Yeah.
And I'll just jump in there and say that one of the disappointing things for me was the amount of influence, and this was me reading things, right? I wasn't there, but the amount of influence it appeared that the fossil fuel companies had. They were out in force with, I think, hundreds of different people showing up, trying to influence, trying to lobby with giant displays and kind of the shared common space. So yeah, that is definitely disappointing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found as a disappointment was it left unresolved any sort of firm way to hold countries accountable for their commitments. Yeah. I mean, this was the beauty of Paris. Everybody came with saying, here's what I can do, and let's add it all up and see where we get. But we still don't have a great way to hold countries accountable. Yeah. They say these things, but is there accounting right? There was that Washington Post article that talked about our countries actually counting their emissions correctly. And, there were some good pledges made and some more aggressive targets set, but it still isn't actually enough to keep 1.5 alive. So that's the bad news side of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's been a lot of progress, but it's still not enough. And there's still a lot of fuzziness in these commitments. One of the other disappointing things is that, the meeting ended with not enough protections for vulnerable countries. So representatives from the Maldives and Tuvalu and other island nations were really making the case that the developed countries really need to set binding targets, or else their very homes are going to go underwater. And they also were not able to agree on a loss and damage waiver, which which is an agreement where wealthier countries would help to pay for the climate damage they have caused less wealthy countries. So that's a real disappointment.
Yeah, and I just picture, sorry, I'm going to stereotype here. I know plenty of Americans who are like, if somebody else caused me harm, they should be the ones to fix it. They're very all about other people taking accountability when they're harmed. But in this case, it's the wealthy nations who contributed the most to climate change, harming these countries that are still developing and don't have the wealth. And we still haven't, the US and other wealthy countries have not come to the table with an adequate solution to undo some of the damage. I think you said it well. Some progress has been made, but it's just not enough. And there was somebody succinctly said it or phrased it for me. I can't remember where I was reading this, but the vulnerable countries pointed out many times during the conference that a half a degree between 1.5 and 2 is honestly the difference between life and death for them. Yeah. Their homes sticking around or their islands disappearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the wealthier countries at the Paris Climate Accord, they agreed to provide $100 billion a year in climate assistance to developing countries. And they have just kind of delayed and not really turn over those funds. And so now again, they have a renewed promise. Oh yeah, we'll get around to that now. We'll do it. But they're dragging their feet, and it leaves many developing countries without the resources they need to build clean energy systems and respond to these weather disasters. So right. That's kind of disappointing. But and then I guess the last piece of bad news, and then we'll move on to the good news, is that kind of related to what you were saying a minute ago. The final agreement still leaves unresolved the question of how quickly each nation needs to cut emissions over the next decade. So there's a lot of still generalized language, like, yeah, we all know we need to cut emissions, but there's still just too much gray area, too much wiggle room.
Yeah, and it was interesting because there was this big push to keep 1.5 alive. That was one of the catchphrases, keep 1.5 alive. And so the good news in that is that it really did galvanize the direction towards, 1.5 is not just preferable, it really is a must-have. Yeah. And it's not going to be easy. And to your point about, our countries setting a fast enough pace to reach their targets, that's left to be determined. But the good news is, like, when we went into COP26, the pledges were basically on track for like a 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature increase across the globe, which would be catastrophic for the current way of life that we consider normal. With the renewed vigor, urgency, and some new pledges that came out, the IEA, International Energy Agency, is now estimating that we might hit 1.8 degrees, which is good. But then there's another organization, the Carbon Tracker, that thinks the estimate is more like 2.3. So the good news is we moved from 2.7 with the current pledges down. How far down is kind of will be determined in the next several months as people kind of calculate what the pledges are and firm those up. And it's closer to 1.5, but we're still not there yet, right? We've made progress, but there still is more work to do.
Yeah, it is great to have this momentum and have everybody kind of moving in the same direction, but yeah, it's not quite enough. One of the things that I thought was great is, that thing we talked about first, how India and China watered down that language from phasing out coal to phasing down coal. Well, the good side of that is that it's the first time, I was really surprised to learn this, it's the first time that fossil fuels have actually been mentioned in a COP declaration.
Yeah. I know, right? So that's a positive thing. And it's also kind of a bang my head against a wall when I heard that never before had fossil fuels been mentioned in an official COP document.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, I guess that's good. And the other,
go ahead. You go.
The other thing I thought was great news is that, in Paris, there was an agreement that the countries would have to report their progress every 5 years. But at this COP meeting, they decided that countries had to report their emissions every year. So they're all supposed to come back to the table next year and report their emissions. So I think that's really good news. We need to have tighter controls on this tracking and reporting.
And that, I feel like COP was a great reminder that I can feel multiple things at once. Because as we were talking about earlier, there still isn't enough accountability. And this is increased accountability. So the progress was made, but it still isn't enough. Another thing from the business sector that I found really interesting is that I feel like now, and a few places I was reading verified this, that the energy is shifting from sustainability is no longer a nice to have fluffy thing for companies, but the pressure has really ramped up that sustainability is a must have. It is fundamentally going to change business. And part of this was evidenced by all of the finance ministers from different countries, the CFOs from international corporations showing up there and having a really serious conversation about financing and funding. And what does this mean for bottom lines? What does this mean for price, the price of carbon intensive energy versus renewable cleaner energy? So there was some really good progress made, and that fundamental shift from nice to have fluffy sustainability for business, like it's good for PR and marketing to know actually this is essential, mirrors some of the questions we've been having with our clients, where it used to be like, oh, we're doing this for leadership and it's a good thing to do. And I'm seeing the conversations with some of our clients like, wow, this is essential. I'm glad we started 5 years ago with you, Verdis, and it's so essential now, and we're actually ahead of the curve because we got started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a really important article that came out from McKinsey and Associates the other day talking about how it is essential for every company to understand their pathway to net zero emissions. And it's like you said, it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's an essential business function that every corporation should have. So yeah, that's good.
And I like the net zero pathway. I think this goes back to the justice piece of the wealthy countries have had more of an impact historically, and China and the US still are the top two emissions emitters in the world. Some of the conversations I've had with clients over the last few years is like, well, but the Paris Accord is like an 80% reduction by 2030. Why would we set a net zero goal? But in a country where we have more resources and wealth to be able to make changes, I think that that's part of the justice equation. If we can get people in the US to get to zero by 2030, even though that's more aggressive than the Paris Agreement says we should, they're talking for the whole globe. We're disproportionately responsible for them. So I think we should accelerate our timeline for getting to net zero.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple other good pieces of good news, and then we'll wrap up for our viewers. One thing that I'm really happy about is that there was a major deal on how to regulate the carbon markets. And I think that is a piece that was very much needed. There was a little too much fuzziness about carbon markets. So getting some more clarity around that is going to be huge. There was also a really important agreement around protecting the world's forests. And I'm really happy to see that. Those natural climate solutions are very important, and we want to protect and sustainably manage our forests. So that's pretty much my top 5 of the good news. Did you have any other pieces of good news, Daniel?
I think you hit them, Kim. I'll just add on to the forest piece. I love the work of, I'm blanking on her name. Simard is her last name, Professor Simard. She just came out with a book called Finding the Mother Tree, and she's doing forestry research. She's one of the researchers that discovered the mycelial network of fungal connections and resource sharing, but she has shifted her language and her and doubled down on her research to show the interrelationship of the forest, and that old growth forests have such a deeper and more impactful role than these quick, like clear cut replant. Oh, we're still reforesting and we're planting these new. It doesn't have the diverse ecosystem in the soil. The mother tree, this framework of the mother tree actually is sending resources and information to the offspring, the younger trees of the forest. And so when we can preserve these mother trees, these old growth forests, or even a forest that was just replanted 100 years ago, it's much more effective for carbon reduction and creating a balanced ecosystem than saying, oh, we're going to plant a bunch of new trees. We need to do both. So I feel kind of like this whole thing with COP26, it was a both and. It's progress and it's not far enough. We need to protect forests, but we also need to plant forests. We need to reduce methane and we need to reduce CO2. So I guess my final kind of key takeaway would be, if you are listening to this and you haven't developed a climate action plan yet, or even a smaller, just emissions focused pathway to net zero emissions, and you want to learn more, check out our free downloadable available at verdisgroup.com. We have a how to develop a climate action plan and a net zero pathway, just overview that can help you think about what you can do with your organization. So Kim, I love talking to you because you always have such unique and thoughtful perspectives.
Thank you, Daniel. Likewise.
And you're so plugged in to, you've got your finger on the pulse of climate action kind of nationwide. So to wrap up, I'll let you have the last word of takeaway. So in 1 minute or less, what's the one thing that gives you hope in this world of climate action right now?
What gives me hope is that so many people care about our planet, and more people are talking about it. The conversation has just become so elevated, and with all of us working together, we can make change. It may not be fast enough to reverse climate change. It probably will not be, but I know that working together, we can make significant change, and it's fascinating to watch that transformation happen.
Not just watch, Kim, you're a part of it.
Yeah, help make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Well said. So I'll leave it there because, yeah, that was perfect. So thanks everybody for watching. If you want to watch any past Facebook Live discussions, sign up for our newsletter or read our blog, visit us at verdisgroup.com. And remember, we're offering that free downloadable on how to develop a climate action plan. So go ahead and check that out on our website. Thanks again for the thought-provoking conversation, Kim. Onward and upward to a wonderful week, everyone.